Back to another edition of Inside Great Lakes Sailing. My name is Greg Norman, your host. We get a chance today to talk to the president of Quantum Sales, Ed Reynolds. Ed's going to talk a little bit about the sailmaking business, Quantum, the career that he chose at the age of 21 by moving to Traverse City. And the interesting part of the story for me is that Ed and I actually grew up in the same hometown of Fenton, Michigan. And we're going to talk a little bit about beginnings and all that it means now that we're older gentlemen talking about it. But it was a really fun interview with Ed, and I think you'll enjoy that interview. We're also going to check in with Grace Pytell. And Grace is the director of sailing for the Detroit Community Sail Center at the Belle Sail Club over on Belle Isle. And I think you're going to find that to be a really fun interview. They had a great program this past summer with Challenge the Wind. And we're going to kind of do our first commercial. If you've watched this show in the last 80, this is now the 86th episode, take the time to spend a couple of dollars and maybe support the Detroit Community Sailing Center. The address will be up at the end of the show on some of the interviews. And if you can help them out in any way, and you've enjoyed this show in any way, I don't want to do a PBS telethon here, but as you know, I'm involved in the coaching business and being around kids, and this is a great program. We want to help them any way we can to get more young folks in all kinds of boats. So Harry Jones has done a great job, and Grace has added to that staff, and I think you'll be very impressed with the interview, and anything you can do to help will certainly be appreciated. And I think that from me to you guys, I hope that's something you'll certainly consider. We also get a chance to check in with Scott Herman. Scott was on the show a couple of weeks ago, and Scott spent some time telling us about a program out of South Carolina that's going to visit Detroit next year. It was in Chicago this summer. It was all about teaching autistic children and to be involved in sailing. And I think it'll be really fun. They had a 5-minute promotional video, and I got a chance to watch it, and it's to the point. And if you've got a couple of seconds, take a look at it, because I think it's extraordinary. That said, Ed Reynolds is up next. We'll get him on, and we'll be back in a second. Welcome back. We're talking with Ed Reynolds, the president of Quantum Sales. I think, Ed, if I'm not mistaken, the second biggest sailmaker in the world at this point.
Yeah. Based on dollar volume, I think we're probably stronger in that position today than we were 5-6 years ago.
We have a whole bunch of things to talk about. We're from the same hometown and all kinds of stuff, but I want to take you back to 2007. You're about 12 months on the job with Quantum, and you have to make a splash into the world of sailing where for the most part, it was dominated by North. You made the calculated idea and effort that you were going to get involved in the Med Series. And you did, and you had to drop a serious amount of dollars to get into that series. And it was about marketing. Is that a fair characterization at the time?
What was the last thing you said above marketing?
I said you had to make a splash from a marketing standpoint, and that's what I want to talk a little bit about about the cue that's on my hat. And I say that because there's some legendary stories about you having a discussion with a graphic artist from Italy, if I'm not mistaken.
Actually, from Netherlands.
Okay. So you make the decision that you're going to build your own boat, 2007, and that's got to be a conversation. Is that kind of the linchpin where it all started?
Yeah, I tell you, North was so strong and powerful, and they're a great company, big, strong company. And at the time, I mean, we wanted to get into the Med Cup. We wanted to get into, especially the EU, because the performance sailing is so important over there. And in all honesty, we couldn't give away a set of sales. I mean, we tried everything. And then, Doug DeVos, who's been involved with the company forever, it's like, well, why don't we do it ourselves? And that's kind of was the impetus of how we ended up with quantum racing.
That's a $4 or $5 million proposition when you're making those choices, because you got to build the boat, you've got to make the sales. Is that fair?
Yeah, it's not for the weak of heart. It's a strong financial commitment to be involved at this level for as long as we have.
Are you an eternal optimist? And I say that because you mentioned that you were turned down a bunch, well, by a bunch of sailors and by a bunch of syndicates, and so you got to be the eternal optimist to figure out that I'm going to go build my own boat and race.
Well, we had wanted, with people we worked with, people within the company, we'd had success everywhere we went. And, I thought we had a really solid process. We had really good people. So, it didn't seem like a speculation. It seemed definitely that it was an investment, and I think it has been.
Okay, now you go to the Netherlands to find your graphic artist. Just tell us a little bit of the story. I don't think you were the happiest guy when you saw the original logo. Is that fair?
What I was worried that it was too much over the top. It's like, oh my gosh, we want to be a little subtle. I get teased all the time because my fashion sense is if I can go somewhere, spend the evening and leave and no one remembers I was there, then that's perfect. And, this was a little bit over the top on it, and I called up, his name's Boss, and said, geez, I kind of like it, but boy, it's so really kind of in your face. He goes, yeah, that's how we just decided to go. This will be the most photographed boat in the world. And so he went on and on. He was just so abrupt. And, I said, well, okay, because he was quite expensive. I go, is there any way we can get a better deal on the price? No. He goes, because I am the best. And if you don't do this, you're stupid. It's like, wow, okay. And unfortunately, he was completely right. I mean, it was amazing the impact of I think we were one of the first companies or boats, programs, whatever you want to put it under, that came out and it was in your face. And
when you go from 2007 to 8, making this decision and going through all the decisions you're making, are there sleepless nights, or is it just like you said, you had the confidence in your team?
I have just so much confidence in the team. Maybe that's not very smart, but they've been incredible. And we've laughed a lot about it over the years because we've had a lot of successes. And everybody goes, you never celebrate. You seem as grumpy after you win as beforehand. And it's like, well, it's when we win something big, it's more relief than happiness because we had everything in place. We had all the resources we need. And there's always just been an expectation that we were going to be successful.
Winning the Med Cup that year obviously gives it some credibility. And from there, I think then the rest of it takes care of itself, right? Because the victory means you obviously got the product and you proved it. So how does that change if you don't win?
Just never really thought that part through.
You just knew you were going to
win. We were really confident that we could go and compete at any level.
That put quantum on the map, and you guys have really never looked back. Is that fair?
I think that's a really fair statement, especially in the EU. It took a little while to get more traction here in the United States, but in the EU, I've said multiple times, most people's image of quantum and how quantum does things is really based on the quantum racing platform.
At the end of the day, marketing works, but if you don't have the product, it doesn't mean much.
Well, the Grand Prix level, it's a business to business aspect in the world of sailmaking. At the Grand Prix level, it's really driven by the pro sailors, the advocates, the influencers. they've got to be confident that you can support them and make sure that they're successful with their clients. And this really established relationships and established credibility with a lot of the pro sailors who, amazingly enough, took us along with them.
And a lot of the decisions that you've made have been chronicled historically. You don't look over your shoulder an awful lot. You look ahead. And I say that because there's got to be an awful lot of confidence in making those kinds of decisions. I mean, it's either or. And I don't think there's an or for you. It's either you move forward. Would people say that know you well?
Yeah, they accuse me of that a lot. It's like, what's plan B? Well, plan B is to execute plan A.
Okay. That's confidence. I mean, where did that come from?
The people around me. I mean, the people that we had relationships with, Doug DeVos, Terry Hutchinson, Warwick Fleury, Ed Baird. I mean, I've just been so fortunate. The people that, are in our company, they just come through every time, it seems like.
Well, some of that must also be skill, because one of the guys you hired out of college was Terry Hutchinson, who turned out to be arguably one of the best sailors in American history. So you must have an eye for something that the rest of us miss.
Yeah, I don't know. There was just an aura about Terry as 21, 22 years old, putting him in the right position. In all honesty, and I'm not, I've told Terry this, once he moved out to Traverse City from Annapolis, and I got to know him better, because I really didn't know him that well. I just knew of him, and I knew it was a profile that was really critical for where we wanted to take the company. And then after sailing with him some, it's like, oh my gosh, there's a big responsibility here. This is the prodigy. And, the things that we do, we were really goal focused, and it was amazing watching him sail. And sailing with him has just been one of the biggest pleasures of my life. And still working with him on these programs is amazing.
All right. Well, let me take you back to 75, which is, first of all, you grew up in the Fenton area. We both did. We've had those conversations. I don't want to bore people because it doesn't matter. But you have a chance to grow up in an area that I think was a monumental, at least in my career. And I would think that it would be in most folks, that we're just very fortunate to be very supportive communities where we both grew up. But now it's 75. You kind of want to live in Traverse City. That's about the only goal at that point that you have. Is that fair?
Pretty much. I graduated in 1973, and about 2.5 months after I graduated, I had everything I owned in the world and brought it to Traverse City, and to go to NMC, community college here, with no plan B. I decided, this is where I'm going to live. I'm going to figure out a way to live here. And, one thing led to another, and it's worked out pretty well.
Why Traverse City?
Well, I followed my girlfriend at the time.
Okay.
And I'd never been to Traverse City before. And when I got up here, and just, I don't want to, blab too much. It's the best place on the planet. I love its beauty. It's clean. It's safe. It's a pain in the butt getting anywhere. If I go to Europe or I go to Chicago, it's all day. So that's the only negative thing I can see about Traverse City. But I love the community. I love being a part of it, raising my family here, and it was absolutely the right thing for me to do.
Now, as you were traversing to Traverse City, how's that for a segue? As you're moving into boating and sailing was not even on the radar. That was not something you'd even sailed at that point, right?
No, I was really justified it because I like to ski, and I like to fly fish, and which I don't do either at all anymore. But that was one of the primary things. But I had never been on a sailboat before.
Okay, so somebody tells you there's, and I'm get this right, Babel and Bushbinder. Am I got the name
Babel
right?
Bookbinder. Yep.
Okay, now just talk briefly. In the old days, and I say the old days because we're old, but in those days, obviously North was a huge sailmaker, but sailmakers typically were lofts in small communities and much more downsized than they are of the corporate sales they are now. That's kind of the landscape.
Yeah, exactly. You know, they were like that's why they call them sail lofts. Normally, the sail making got taken care of in the loft above the chandleries, and you're just regionally specific to the local fleet and the people that the type of sailing they did. Um, so you know that part of it, you know, commercializing it and taking it into bigger entities like Sobsad did at one point, North, and where we're at with Quantum. It's a difficult thing because it's not a one size fits all. I mean, the regional needs of the local fleets are really different, even from Detroit to San Francisco and Italy to the Netherlands. You know, they're complete different expectations of what a sailmaker would provide them.
So you walk into a sailmaker. If you'd have walked into, I don't know, the Grand Traverse Hospital, would you be a doctor now? Obviously, my point is you went into the sailmaking business looking for a job to pay the rent. And somewhere along the line, something must have hit. What was it that was the what was the linchpin that turned the tide?
You know, well, it was funny because I was unloading semi trucks at Myers, the new Myers in Traverse City, and the guy that I was working with, I think I was making 256 an hour, and you know, he was telling me, he goes, yeah, he goes, I'm going to get a job at the sailmaker, and I mean, this sounds ridiculous, but up till that point, I had never thought about sales. I go, wow, somebody does have to make those, don't they? And this guy was his family sailed, and so he made an introduction for me, and I went in and basically harassed him for about 4 weeks. There was something about it when I walked in, the smell, the sound. Uh, the other thing is I have a really poor attention span, and one of the things that still making was so good for me is I could start something and finish it in a day.
Okay.
And for me, I just don't operate when things drag on. I like, here's what we're going to do. Let's focus. Let's get it done. Let's move on to the next one. And you know, sailmaking was perfect. It fed that part of me real strongly.
As you're building sales, when did you figure out that this was more than paying the rent and it was going to be maybe a vocation?
You know, in all honesty, the very first day, you know, I offered to work for free. He's just, you know, and guy Bill Babel, he was just like sick of me by that point. Okay, come in. And so, you know, I said, I won't charge you. Just let me see if I can pick it up. And around, you know, they opened at 8. I was there about 7. And around 1 in the afternoon, he came back and go, okay, I'll hire you. And but by then I was, you know, I'm not sure why. It makes no sense, but there's just a sound, a feel, a smell. You know, I sort of just felt like I was where I needed to be.
So you're making sales. When did you figure out that you probably needed to know how to sail since you're making the sales that power the boat?
Well, Bill and his brother Tommy Babel were, you know, they're best sailors from up here, and they were kind enough to kind of teach me and take me out, get me broken in on what sailing was all about. And then just a whole series of events of, I don't know, I just felt like luck. They just kind of happened at the right times in the right places. And I got exposed to some amazing sailors, amazing people that were nice enough and took the time to take me along with them.
In that first decade, you end up starting your own company, Reynolds Sales, if I'm not mistaken, right?
Yeah, well, that was one, Kenny Reed, Dan Neary, Jay Lutz, Greg Fisher, a lot of names in the past. We had worked for quite a while under the banner of shore sales, and it just didn't seem like it was fitting. It was kind of moving on, and so I just created Reynolds sales for a period of time because at that point I had been involved with a number of pretty solid programs and had developed a reputation. And I think the reputation I got wasn't so much as a great sailor or a great. I found this little niche between, and I've got to find a better way to explain it. But with these top end Grand Prix programs, you got the money ego and you got the talent ego, and they're natural adversaries. It's kind of funny because all the money guys are like, well, geez, if I wasn't working to make enough money to buy this boat and I could sail all the time like these guys, I'd be as good as them. And then the talent ego is like, well, geez, this guy's got all this money, he doesn't know what he's doing. And so I figured I could be the bridge between those.
Okay.
And kind of and that's probably what I did more often than not for about the first 25, 30 years. The customers, the money ego, and like I said, I got to find a better term for it. They'd look at me, it's like, you've been a successful businessman, you understand the value of a dollar, and we sort of connected. And by that point, I had done enough Grand Prix sailing that the top sailor said, Ed knows what we need to be successful. And I don't think anybody else wanted that role. So it just sort of naturally opened up for me.
Ed, having rubbed elbows with all of those national and international sailors and the guys that own the syndicate, have you ever met anybody that had the money that could sail like the guys that they might be envious of?
I know this is going to sound like I'm sucking up, but Doug DeVos is one of the best drivers, pro or amateur, that I've ever seen. He is an amazing sailor. Okay. There's a handful, a couple of customers of ours where Harm Mueller, the TP-52 platoon, incredible talent. So yeah, there's quite a few of them, but you got to commit a lot of time. I mean, if you want to be a world-class sailor, it just comes from experience, being smart enough and experience.
There's a lot of people that want to be pro sailors, but there's only a few Dennis Connors and Terry Hutchinsons and guys like that. From your experience, is it just something they have innate that the rest of us don't have? It's maybe the Michael Jordan or the Tiger Woods. And again, I'm not comparing, but sometimes they just see things differently than the rest of us do.
Yeah, it's interesting because, like I said, I've been lucky enough to spend a lot of time with some of the top sailors. And people always ask me, what's their trait? And it's like an unhealthy obsession with their craft. Okay. I mean, they are so in tune, so committed. I mean, a lot of them have gone through, personal situations because they're so focused. And it's one of those things, at the top level here, you can do it into your 60s. And, and these top pros do really well financially now. But and each of them have a different thing. Terry outworks everybody. He drives everybody so hard, but he drives himself harder than anyone else.
Right.
And that's why he gets away with it, if you will. You look at some of these guys, just the geometry, the way they can look. It's interesting when you look at these tacticians, especially. They can do a maneuver here, knowing that there's 4 more maneuvers in place that they have to create to get to where they want to do it. And, I'm a huge fan of Grand Prix monohull racing, just from the fact of watching some of the world's best tacticians go head to head in this 52 circuit. I could watch it all day.
One of the things we've talked about with other guys at the top level is that whether it's the Sail GP or whether it's even the 52s, the guys at the top are all sharing information because they all want to be fast. It's the equivalent of the IROC car series. We don't get to build a different boat. We just want to see who the best sailor is. And if everything's equal, that kind of works. And it's gaining popularity, that process is gaining popularity, coming even down to junior sailing, where it becomes more of your talent, less than what you're sailing with the equipment you have.
Yeah, for sure. You have to understand the equipment. It's interesting once again, because I've spent so much time in the 52s, some world-class tacticians come in, and they get where the shifts are, where they need to start, the big strategy. But probably the biggest place they struggle early on is the equipment specific factor of what it goes into. Where can you put a TP52 and 8 knots of breeze, 3 boat lengths from the weather mark? Those are the types of things where, these really good guys figure it out pretty quickly.
I heard a story last year. Bob Hughes said that he knew there was a problem when they raced in, I think it was the Chicago race. He said he was sleeping down below the 52, and he says when he heard a chainsaw, he knew they had drifted way too close to the Lake Michigan shore. So you make mistakes, you do what you do. We were talking earlier in 7 about maybe having that opportunity of winning the 52 series with sort of the takeoff of Quantum. Your takeoff back then was building some sails, I think, for a boat called Collaboration, which was a Newport to
Bermuda. Yeah.
Bermuda winner, right? Do you have to have those sort of landmark times to be able to get the publicity to get yourself known? Is that part of the success?
That was Dr. Oliver Grin, who I owe so much of what's happened to me in my life to that. That boat was so amazing. The IMS rule was just starting to gain traction. I jokingly, even though it's true, I said the boat was so great that even we couldn't screw it up. And, we won Key West, won both MAC races, and we won virtually everything we did to put the boat in. And then the next year, I don't know if you remember, there was a Nelson Merrick 40 called Sensation. Sensation, then another, in success bred success. It gave us credibility. And, I think we were at the time humble enough not to take too much credit and just were honest with everybody. Then that led to Flash Gordon, and that led to China Cloud, and that led to Vim, and a series of boats all based upon the success we had with Collaboration.
You mentioned that you were kind of the branch between the owner and the talent, so to speak. Is reading people maybe a strength of yours that is something that you think about, that kind of strength, or is it just something? What is it that allows you to be able to have that glue that keeps things together?
I don't know. I feel I'm a pretty good judge of character. I have high expectations for everybody involved with me, which is probably a personality flaw. But, I think I've made really good personnel decisions over the years. I've been so lucky, and, the people in Quantum, I wouldn't trade them for anyone. The people we work with on programs, and, it's interesting, the people that aren't just great people persons, good talent, but, just being a great person is the most important aspect of it, because we can fit them in. We can bring a lot of people up with their skill sets, but you got to want it, and you got to be a good person.
Have you always been this humble?
No, I'm just honest. No, I'm not. I'm as unhumbled as anybody. I mean, I've got an ego. There's some things I know that I'm really good at, but I also know it's a skill set that's not really on its own overly good for anything, but collectively with really talented people and processes, I think it's been effective.
Everybody that I've talked to who knows you is, he's the glue. He's the guy that keeps the train moving down the tracks, which obviously comes with the optimistic personality that you bring and that sort of dogged idea of moving forward. Quantum didn't get to be the size they are, the second biggest sailmaker in the world, without some direction. And so is that kind of, is planning and sort of pre-planning what takes up most of your time?
Yeah, well, it's, what's our strategy? What differentiates us from other sailmakers? And what do these customers really want? It's interesting. I mean, I've been doing this a long, long time, and sometimes I'm not sure exactly what makes a great sale and what doesn't make a great sale. So, what we really focused on, and once again, I was really fortunate to have a number of opportunities. It comes down to, triangles are triangles. A really good crew will figure out how to get the most out of a bad triangle. And, so what we've really tried to do is focus on the process, to be there for our customers after they buy the sails. I'm really data driven, even though everybody in the company that sees this is going to laugh when they hear that, because I can barely get my emails. But
it does bring up this point. You could make 20 years ago, you could say sail making was an art. It doesn't mean that there wasn't science involved, because there obviously was. But with the CADs and the kind of technology that's available, and you mentioned that you're data driven, I would think that this is no longer an art, that is in fact a science. And so my question to you is, do you trust the science that you see, or is it still part of that art that becomes that question of maybe the difference, that 1% difference between you and North?
Well, it's funny that you bring that up, because part of what led to me being president of Quantum was we were in a meeting with all the other owners of Quantum and Doug's advisors, and our marketing footprint was quantum sales. Where sail making's a performing art, and I just hated that. I hated it, and I listened to this in a meeting, and finally, and I don't lose my patience very often, but it's like, no, sail making is not a performing art. Sail making's a physical science. It's measurable. Every bit of it is data points. And Lowell North was the first one to really grab a hold of that. And it's like, and the more we do this, the better that we can quantify what we do, the more success we're going to have. I mean, it used to be, early on, you'd come out and you'd sight down the batten on the luff curve and you'd pat the guy on the back. Yep, draw that one. I think that's a good. It's not like that at all anymore.
I'm buying a new sail, a head sail, and it was interesting that I asked 2 or 3 people that I know. They were using the measurements that they get from, I'm guessing, online somewhere. And a guy from Quantum came out and measured my boat. He's the only one. And not all boats are built the same, and not all numbers are being equal, but I thought the service part of that discussion was kind of cool. And that's something that the other 2, again, major companies, they trusted the numbers that they had. But my point to you is that when you're looking at that sail, that new one, and you see it on the computer, I'm assuming that you now know that that's going to work exactly the way it is because of the science.
We have an amazing amount of confidence in our design programs, our database, all the experience. But once again, I think, we get it confirmed with really, we build our company out of diverse subject matter experts. We like to think the one place, we don't do a lot of super yacht business, even though there's a lot of interest in us doing it, but what we try to do is make sure that, everybody can't be an expert at everything. So we just try to find the experts. And if you're in San Francisco and you need a multi-hull cruising product, our guy in Annapolis is the best in the world at that. And so, that's what we try to do, is get the person that can bring the most value to a relationship with our customer into play as quickly as we can.
Computer world used to be every 18 months. Now it's every 6 months. In the sail world, the cloth is obviously whether it's, how often does the science of cloth change within a sail? I understand there's different levels, but that's something you stay on top of every 3 months, every 6 months, or somebody's got something new, and how does that give us an idea on the sale part of the threads?
Well, I mean, it's interesting because I think there's the spin that is changing constantly all the time. And I'm horrible with dates, but the 3DI process spring sales, those were 40 years. 3DI North, North is the product company. And so they're more pushed to come up with unique products only to them. Their 3DI product, once again, I can't remember. But it was around the Swiss group that developed 3DI. We had meetings with them in 2000. I think right after the 2007 America's Cup, Alinghi had worked hard on the 3DI, and that's when North acquired that technology. We've just continued to develop and create better and stronger. No revolution in a product has come out of us, but we've been really strong on the evolution of the products.
Okay. I asked that question because, everybody's got, if you got a product, you have to have something new and improved every year. But if the product doesn't change, maybe design changes to some extent. I mean, Dacron is Dacron,
Yeah, the designs change, and the level and the knowledge of the subject matter experts that can transfer to a client. Yeah, I'm not going well in 8 knots of breeze. Okay, well, let's look at your rig. Let's look at this. Let's find the reasons that maybe you're having a performance issue. And we have really good people with that.
A swatch of 6-ounce Dacron from 4 years ago looks the same as a 6-ounce swatch of Dacron today.
Yeah, I've been a sailmaker 42 years, and I have a hard time with swatches of Dacron to tell you which is a good one and which isn't.
Yeah. Now, Ed, you're 67, not mistaken?
Yes.
Retirement on the horizon?
Yeah, probably not. A few more years. I mean, I love what I do. It's I want to make sure when I leave, it's handed over completely. Our COO, Andrew Scott, Jared Rushlaw, our CFO, well, he's not our CFO yet, but our controller, they're incredible. I mean, we have such a strong management team, and, I probably still fill the role more of dealing with the top end from a commercial standpoint and just continuing to nudge things in the direction. But in all honesty, those guys run the company now.
Did a 21-year-old Ed Reynolds think he'd be sitting in that seat?
Not a chance.
So Traverse City's been good to Ed Reynolds and Ed Reynolds' family.
Absolutely.
You surround yourself with the people that obviously are successful, but at the same point, this has been a really fun, opportunity to talk to you because you're not exactly what I thought, and it's been really fun finding those things out. Quantum is a great company, and it's been fun to have the conversation. What's up then for? We're coming to the end of the summer. What's over the next 6 months? What's on tap?
Oh, see what happens with the winter sailing after the pandemic. I think there was some pent up energy, pent up demand for, going south. It's been interesting. Surviving the pandemic was one thing, but then coming out of the pandemic is really the hardest thing I've ever been a part of. Where's it going to go? Is it going to come back? We still think the Grand Prix performance sailing, which is really our core business, is still down 20-25% over 2018, 2019. But, we're cautiously optimistic it's going to evolve here pretty quickly.
Are the sales of sales, the retail value, what you're purchasing, are you selling more, or has it been pretty static, pretty continually about the same?
We're selling a lot more.
Okay.
Yeah, and yes, that's it. We're reaching more people. More people are interested. I mean, I got to tell you what the pandemic did. Well, 2 issues were incredibly important to the evolution of quantum. 2008, the recession, and that one, we had gotten our footprint in, and so many people started thinking, wow, everything's so expensive. At the very least, I should check on somebody else.
Right.
And so we got opportunities I doubt we would have never gotten. And then when the America's Cup went from monohulls to the catamarans and the winged mass, it really just hurt North more than anybody, because that was their marketing position. The pandemic was the same thing. Coming into the pandemic, I mean, I got asked at least 4 or 5 times a month, well, does Quantum make cruising sales? It's like, yeah, we make great cruising sales, but all I see is the racing footprint. And then when the pandemic hit and the racing went away, I mean, how agile and proactive our team was, all of a sudden it went to 70% of our business was cruising business. And so if we can get back to pre-pandemic racing business and continue to grow our cruising business, I see a lot of growth in front of us.
So your market share is growing.
It is growing.
For obvious reasons, because you've got service to go along with the rest of it. So, well, good. Well, listen, I appreciate your time. This has been a real fun interview, and for another Fent night, I appreciate the time to talk to you.
Thank you. I really appreciate you being interested.
I just want to take the time to thank Ed Reynolds for talking to us a little bit about his career, the sail industry, sail making, certainly the technology that's changing. And if you have an interest in being involved in the sail industry professionally, to follow Ed's path, because I think you'll learn a lot of lessons from him. And it was a really fun interview. So I appreciate the time. Up next, I don't know if you remember a couple of weeks ago, we talked to Scott Herman, who has an autistic sailing program for kids from the South Carolina area that was up in Chicago this past year. They put out a little 5-minute video, and we want to be able to kind of highlight that so you see what his program is about. He's hopefully coming up to the Detroit area, Toledo area next summer. So we're going to definitely keep involved in that conversation because I think it's a great program. And then right after the video, we talked to Grace Pytel. We talked a little bit about the Detroit Community Sailing Center. Harry Jones's pet is something that we'll get a chance to teach some kids how to sail. It's a really cool nonprofit program that puts kids on water. We're going to show you some smiling faces. And if you've ever watched this show and you've ever taken 5 seconds out, some of you may know I'm a coach. Some of you know that I'm around kids an awful lot. The Detroit Challenge the Wind and the Detroit Community Sailing Center need your help. And we're going to put up some numbers and some addresses. If you've ever watched the show and enjoyed it, I think we've done, I think this is now show 86. Take the time to give some assistance to both Grace Pytel, the new sailing director, plus Harry Jones, because I think they've improved the program twofold over the last couple of years. We're putting more kids in boats, and that's a great opportunity for the sailing community to, raise the numbers. And you have it. It's a real passion of mine to help kids, and I think if you take a couple of seconds out to do that, at the end of the show, there'll be some information. So if you've got an old Opti, if you've got a boat, if you've got any assistance of any kind, follow the links and see what you can do to give both Harry and Grace and all the kids from Detroit, give them a hand, helping hand, as if you've enjoyed Inside Great Lake Sailing. So up next is Scott Herman's video and a little bit with Grace Pytel. So we'll be back in a second.
Remember what? When I was up here, I was explaining what we saw. Do we remember Layla?
If you look, sail in the same direction, it makes the sail
Yes, to tack the boat, we take our tiller, remember the tiller procedure, and we push it on the same side of the sail and you turn the boat. And that's how we tack.
Great. I mean, Spectrum Sailings have been a nice, I guess it was an unexpected surprise for us, and gave her an opportunity to try out a sport or activity that she really hasn't had the opportunity to be involved with, so that's been huge. And I mean, I think every day it's new stories about what's happened and the interactions with other kids that have been, you can't really, it's hard to put a dollar amount on that. I think it's a really valuable experience for her. And it also gives us an opportunity to think about the possibility of doing some sailing after this. Whether you have a typical kid or a kid with special needs, you also have to pry a few questions out of them. But just overall enjoyment of the activities, getting out on the water, just talking with other kids. I think it always helps when they're surrounded by kids with similar challenges as themselves. After having that experience, because really this is about experiences, giving them experiences so they know there's not, oh, I can't go do that because they don't offer that for people like myself. And it's just that after day one experience and just feeling more comfortable. And that's really what a lot of these kids need. It's just that, additional opportunity to try something out and not be kept from it.
We would totally recommend this to other families. We just feel very lucky that we were able to find out about it and give him this opportunity, because there aren't opportunities like this that exist for kids who have needs like Ben, and for him to have the right kind of support and have a positive experience and learn to do something he could do his whole life is really priceless. It's been really amazing, and yeah, we feel really lucky.
welcome back. We're talking to, for the second time on Inside Great Lakes Sailing, Grace Pytel, although this time you're wearing a different hat. Grace, you took over at the beginning of the summer for the Detroit Community Sailing Center, which is a junior sailing program for some of the kids in the Detroit area.
Correct.
And I believe at the Detroit Boat Club, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, the former Detroit Boat Club. It's now the Belle Boathouse. And yeah, that's
And
where we are.
just before this, before we had a chance to talk, there was a bunch of pictures and music of some, just a ton of smiling faces. Your organization took a giant step. You obviously got a director hired. There's more kids in the program, and kind of take us through from where your entry into it was, and maybe talk a little bit about the summer.
Sure. Yeah. So this summer I took over as the director. The youth program has been around for a very long time, since 1994. It was originally started by the Greyhaven Sail Club, and their mission was expanding access to sailing to those who would otherwise not have the opportunity. And our mission has not changed. That has been in place ever since the beginning. And so our youth program is known as Challenge the Wind, and they've moved to a couple different locations on the river over the past, was it 20 years, 25 years? And just a couple years ago in 2019, Harry Jones, who is the president of the organization, he's been involved for a very long time. So he took the whole organization to the next step, and we've expanded as the Detroit Community Sailing Center. And so now that encompasses adult learn to sail program and the youth program, which still remains Challenge the Wind. And we just are now under a bigger umbrella of Detroit Community Sailing Center. So now we are at the Belle Boathouse. We've been there since 2019. The excess flooding and COVID didn't help, but we are back on track to be building into a bigger and stronger organization.
For those who visited Belle Isle, the old Detroit boat, the Belle Isle facility you're talking about it's in semi disrepair. Is that a fair statement?
Yep.
But the
building
docks are perfect. That's my point. The docks are absolutely in wonderful shape.
Where we are, we did some rebuilding a couple years ago, so our docks are just fine. The building needs some love, but I think everyone knows that. And
Yeah, no, and I wasn't meant disparagingly. We've driven by there a number of times with our boat, and it's seeing those kids out there is just really cool.
Yeah.
You know, I think
Yeah, we had a
what does a director this year do offering the program that helps a little bit that maybe it didn't before? And what was that step? Is it numbers? Is it certainly donations as part of that?
What I think what I've brought to the program is a lot more experience with junior sailing, since I've coached and worked and grew up in junior sailing programs. And we didn't change a lot of the content and how we run things. And I'm helping with a lot of the administration and getting the adult program up to speed with the good curriculum, and helping with more of the intermediate level youth kids that I'm helping with those guys. I know a little bit more about some of the racing techniques, and helping bring that to the table and grow their skill set a little bit more.
As director, did you learn anything this summer?
Learned a few things. Yeah. It was a really good experience, learned a lot. And I've definitely learned about where I want to go next. I have a long list of ideas of what I want to do for the coming seasons.
Now, any of your kids running any of the DRYA races?
Not yet. We are registered and able to, and we tried with a couple of the sailors this season, and they're like, yeah, we don't really want to. I was like, okay. And so we didn't, not going to push them to do something they don't want to.
How many kids in the program right now?
This summer, I did some note taking this morning. We had 47 total kids, so about 30 kids in each session, or 27, 28 kids in each session for a 2-week session.
Okay. How many adults?
The adult program, about 40, I think. Okay. We broke it into 2 sessions this summer, and yeah.
So to Howard's credit, and certainly yours, the program the numbers are coming, aren't they?
They're coming along. Yep. And with goals and dreams to do more. So that's the idea.
Now, there was quite a bit of donation. You guys ended up with a few more boats, I think, than you had last year. Is that also accurate?
The boats, number of boats were the same from last year, but I think I'm trying to remember, we did have a huge amount of boats donated within the last 5 years from, a lot of that was facilitated by GPYNEF, and that's super helpful to us and just gives more opportunity to get more kids on the water.
If I have an older boat sitting in my backyard and it's not in disrepair and I want to donate something, let's start with boats. What is it that you guys need desperately?
For boats right now, we're focusing on 420s and Optis, yeah, because that's a majority of what our kids are sailing and working on. We have a good fleet of Flying Scots, but we could always use some Scots that are not 30 years old. So we're hoping to improve the quality of that fleet. Anything else at this point, just let us know and we'll take a look at it, because we're trying to not accumulate too many boats, as you know how the fleet grows and
Right.
it gets a little too much.
How do we, and in your case specifically, how do we get more kids in boats? I understand it's a matter of financial opportunity that, and we're going to talk a little bit about donations to your organization, but is it different recruiting for a private club than it might be for yours? And is it, at the end of the day, is it money equals opportunity?
Not necessarily. Yeah, the ultimate question, how do you get kids in the water and continuing sailing? For our program, we are heavily subsidized by grants and donations and fundraising and all that. So our program cost is very low, and we have a lot of kids come in and they just appreciate it so much and they love it. And that's our whole goal, is to make it easy to get into sailing, because there is the stigma that it is very expensive. And it can be, and it doesn't have to be. So that's what we're working on, is our main goal. As for retention beyond sailing, that's definitely a project close to my heart, and been working on that diligently to try and come up with some solutions, because everyone's trying to figure that one out. So.
All right, so let's talk specifically. I've got a child and he wants to learn to sail, and this is now, I don't know, May of 23. How much does it cost to be in your program this year? And if there's an increase, you can mention that. But what does it cost for a one session?
A 2-week session is $100.
Okay, and typically, just to give that reference point, that cost is probably 4 or 5 times if you're doing it in a private club. Is that fair?
I think so. I haven't looked at specifically any numbers, but yeah, it is definitely much, much less expensive.
Now, you're a person that wants to be able to see an opportunity to provide maybe a scholarship. I'm not exactly sure what the word might be here, but if you've watched Inside Great Lakes Sailing at all in the last 86 issues, and I got to tell you, we've been really fortunate. Last few weeks, we've done Paul Kayard and Terry Hutchinson. We're really actually interviewing some serious kind of guys. If you've enjoyed the program, this is a program close to my heart. We do a number of things in the Detroit area for lacrosse in the city. You need to donate to this program. We're going to put up a little blurb, if we will, if that's okay with you guys. This really needs more support than it's getting. And it's something that if you enjoyed this thing for 5 minutes, then Grace and Howard need your help. So Grace, I'll put this thing up at the end when we're done talking from that standpoint.
Sure.
Sort of I've done a commercial in 86 shows, so I guess this is my first one. But if you look at the faces, and we're looking at some right now, if you look at the faces of the kids and the kind of fun they had, it doesn't matter. It's just fun. And I think that's the point that you guys have tried to drive home.
Exactly. Yep. Having fun while learning to sail, and if they enjoy it. And we make a point to ask the kids, okay, like, what do you want to do today? And keeping an eye on, okay, make sure they work beyond their comfort zone, but don't push them to do anything that they're afraid of. And just, do you want to sail with a buddy? Sure, let's sail with the buddy. And once they start to figure it out, it's pretty fun to watch how they light up and like, wow, this is actually pretty awesome. Like, yes, it is. So it's a good time.
For you as a coach, when you see the light go on in those eyes of one of those students, is that pretty much it's not enumeration to pay the rent, but it's got to be a pretty good feeling.
That's the whole goal. That's the mission.
Okay,
Yeah.
Let me go off topic for a second. You're one of the few women that have a captain's license. Am I getting that right?
Correct.
Are you using that in any way? Because we interviewed you, I think, about a year or so ago about this Are
Yeah.
you utilizing that the license?
Specifically with this program, no, not yet. But I am still working as a captain in the off season. I've got a couple classes coming up, and so I'll probably head down south for the winter. And yeah, it's a good time. I really love it. So this makes it's a good way to balance everything out. So I still get to go play on the water part of the year as well.
So you're figuring out a way to make sailing and being on the water a profession. Is that fair?
Yeah, exactly. Never a dull moment.
Yeah. All right.
Yeah.
So you're done for the summer.
Not yet. We still
Okay.
have our adult program is still going through the end of September. We started up some extra practice sessions for the adults just to get them more time on the water. And then we are aiming to do a September after school session with the kids. I think at this point, we need a couple more registrants, and then we're a go ahead. And because a lot of them are like, what do we do next? I'm like, well, let's do after school sailing, because that makes sense. The weather's beautiful, the boats are there. So I just want to give them more time on the water.
Is getting kids sort of on the inside baseball, or in this case, the sandlot process.
Mm-hmm.
Would that allow us to have kids to maybe really rediscover those boats for themselves and do we get enough time in the boat without being coaches? I guess is my question.
Yeah, that's a good question. I can definitely see because a lot of kids aren't necessarily competitive or want to do the racing or any of that, or they don't even want to know good sailing techniques. We had one kid who just was like, he just lounging in the back of the boat, arms up, feet up, and he looked like he was very bored. And I was like, do you want to go back to the dock? And he's like, no, I'm having fun. I'm just relaxing. And providing a space for them to just be on the water and enjoy it. That's a big part of what we're trying to do too, is if they're having fun, we're not going to stop them and let them enjoy the time of being on the water. And that kid is like, heck yes, I want to come back. And like, I don't want to leave. And so giving them the space to explore what they like about sailing has been pretty cool to watch over the season.
I asked that question because a couple of weeks ago in talking to Paul Kayard, one of the things they're trying to do with the Olympic program is they've spent a lot of time with the ski program, U.S. ski team, both financially as well as operationally. And one of the things that the ski program pointed out to them was, let's assume we're working on angulation today as an example. Well, they used to practice and run gates 70% of the time and free ski 30. And that number is actually flipped, because what they found out, especially at the lower levels, is that if we're working on a specific example in the first part of practice, you send the kids out for an hour, they'll work on that skill on their own. And if they're working on their own because they know that that's going to make them faster, and somebody's not hounding them, they're going to learn it faster. They just, and there's all kind of empirical evidence that suggests that sometimes, and not every kid, but in a general way, we get it from 1,000 sides. And with, helicopter parents now and all the things that you have. And so that was kind of my approach to having that discussion. That's why I was asking the question. I think, and I understand that the dangers of drowning and some of the perils of, but you can make the same argument for a kid riding his bike to the playground. He could get hit and, going across the street. I think if we give kids a chance to just get out more and sail, you got to think that that's going to hold retention a lot better.
Yep. Yeah. So that's what we're trying to do with the September program, and hoping to expand more, just, more time on the water for the kids for next season is a big goal of ours, or mine.
No, I get that.
From sailing. Yeah.
Well, and they're learning from, you're one of the best female sailors around this area. Certainly is. That's kind of cool. Listen, I appreciate your time. At the end of this, if you could be kind enough to send me your information, we'll put this up at the end of this. But guys, take a look at the faces. If you're looking at the faces that are now, again, peering above your head, or at least on your screen, Grace, you had a great summer doing some wonderful things with kids, and I think that's just terrific. So
we had a great time.
Hope you have a great winter for sure.
Thank you.
I just want to thank Ed for coming on board and talking to us a little bit about all of the activities that are involved with Quantum. And I think it was a really cool interview, especially when you're talking with somebody from your hometown where you've got some sort of 6 degrees of separation. I also want to thank Scott Herman and Grace Pytel. If you get a couple of seconds, look at the addresses on the end of the show. please donate to the folks for the Detroit Community Sales Center and Challenge the Wind, for Harry Jones and for Grace. I think it's a well-deserving organization, and they can use our help to put more kids in boats. So that said, we're in September. Enjoy the good weather we have until it gets a little bit colder, and hopefully you've enjoyed this version, and we'll see you next week.